During his State of the Union address on the hallowed steps of the Speaker's podium in the House of Representatives on January 30th, 2018, President Donald J. Trump proudly proclaimed that Americans are dreamers too. While the tagline was specifically responding to former President Barack Obama's controversial Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Act, which granted amnesty to the children of illegal migrants, this sentiment from President Trump spoke to a larger message. We see that immigration in the United States must be significantly reduced, as mass migration has resulted in the destruction of both blue-collar and the middle classes, lower democratic representation of native-born citizens, and falls in line with the popular demand from American citizens. The first point that I want to take a look at is how mass immigration harms American working and middle classes. And we first see that wage suppression has essentially occurred with the development of mass migration. If we look to a study from Harvard economist George Borjas, he has found that immigration reduces the wages for low-skilled American workers by as much as 3 to 8%. Now, why is this? Well, when workers come from other countries with lower standards of living, these workers will accept lower wages and, as a whole, lower the average wage for these positions. Now, a constant argument that proponents of mass migration will say is that these people, if we deported or cut off massive immigration, lots of these jobs would be vacant. The ugly truth, though, is that the reason that that only people from countries with a lower standard of living are accepting those jobs, and that's the norm, is because the value of those jobs has decreased so significantly because of the accepted lower wages. However, companies, for example, an orchard would still have to be able to produce and pick those fruits and pick their crops. Now, if they were left to only use American citizens, they would have to pay more to be able to achieve this. Essentially, immigration, in the words of Borjas, is wealth transfer from the middle and working classes to the management class. But furthermore, we see that there's increased job competition, particularly in construction, agricultural, and service industries. We see that the Center of Immigration Studies in 2015 reports that immigrants account for a significant share of job growth in traditionally native-born working-class industries. We also see this backed up by a study from the employment situation of immigrants from the Center of Immigration Studies. We see that these jobs, they become so overcrowded, and not only are American citizens not accepting them because of the lower pay, but even those who want the jobs are unable to get them because they wouldn't be able to accept that lower pay. But finally, we see on this economic cost, we see that there's overcrowding in public services. Many of the immigrants who come, while they do pay, some do pay taxes, they ultimately receive far more than they put into the system. We see a study from the Heritage Foundation in 2018 that estimates illegal immigration alone cost the U.S. taxpayer $800 billion a year, which far outpaces the contribution from tax benefits from not only illegal migrants, but migrants altogether. Now, all of these social services, which Americans have put together and put their lives into, are ultimately being decimated and overworked because there's too many people. There's not enough people putting it into the system. There's too much being taken out. As we move on from the economic costs, we also see that mass migration undermines democratic representation and national cohesion. We see that large-scale immigration reshapes the electorate without public consent. An analysis by political scientist Eric Kaufman shows that demographic change is essential in influencing electoral outcomes in key states. We see that there is this representation dilution of native-born citizens in high immigrant regions, particularly when we look towards states like Texas. As they began accepting more immigration, the political realities of the state of Texas began to change with that, alongside many of the southern states and, honestly, states across the country. We see this representation dilution, and ultimately it removes political power from the citizens who are already here. U.S. Census data reveals that congressional districts, especially with non-citizen populations, have fewer voting citizens per resident. But furthermore, we can see that the third point is that American public strongly supports immigration reduction. Ultimately, the people who should decide the level of immigration are the people who are already here. And when we look into that, the majority of Americans do not support increases in immigration, and they rather support reductions. Polling consistently actually backs this up. Now, Gallup and Pew Research both show a significant portion of Americans want less immigration. Specifically, a 2024 Gallup poll showing that 55% of Americans Americans support total reductions in immigration, both cutting off illegal immigration and reducing legal immigration. Populist movements across the U.S. reflect this and are largely driven by immigration concerns, including the victories of President Donald Trump in 2016 and 2024. And along with this, in 2016 and 2020 and 2024, according to NBC polls, immigration was consistently a top 3 issue. And there's bipartisan discontent with the current immigration levels, including among immigrants themselves. As we see that, according to NBC in November 6th of 2024, that post-election, President Donald Trump won a majority of young Hispanic men, many reporting on their exit polls that immigration was still a top issue. The United States ultimately must dramatically reduce immigration levels to protect its working and middle classes, its public affairs, safeguard democratic representation, and respond to the will of its people. It's time to prioritize Americans by crafting a policy that aligns with national interests over global interests. A nation without borders is not a nation. Thank you.